Varginha, 20th of January 1996. The afternoon heat was oppressive, the air saturated with humidity from days of relentless summer storms. Red clay soil had turned into viscous mud that clung to shoes and tires with tenacious grip. The scent of wet earth, decaying vegetation and damp concrete created a distinctive olfactory landscape that residents would later recall with vivid clarity. It was within this utterly ordinary setting that something extraordinary transpired. Three young women, Lilian, Valkyria, and their friend, Katia, decided to take their usual shortcut through a vacant lot between residential streets. Their conversation was typical for teenagers, their attention divided between the path ahead and their plans for the remainder of the day. What happened next would forever alter their lives and mark their city. Near a low concrete wall, partially obscured by overgrown weeds, they noticed unusual movement. Crouched in the mud was a figure that defied immediate comprehension. It was small, approximately 4 feet tall, with thin, underdeveloped limbs that seemed too fragile to support its body. The skin was dark brown, with a leathery texture that appeared slick with some unknown substance. The most arresting features were its eyes, disproportionately large, protruding and glowing with a vivid, unsettling red hue, completely devoid of pupils or eyelids. The being seemed disoriented, trembling slightly, as if in a state of profound shock or distress. The girls stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what their eyes were seeing. This was no injured animal, no hallucination brought on by the heat. The creature emitted a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate rather than travel through the air. Fear, primal and immediate, finally overrode their curiosity. They turned and fled, their hearts pounding violently against their ribs. The image of those red eyes already seared into their memory. They burst into their home, their story tumbling out in frantic, disjointed phrases. Their mother, initially skeptical, looked into their faces and saw the genuine, bone-deep terror in their eyes. She knew instinctively this was no childish fabrication. The first thread of the Varginha incident had been pulled. What would happen when official authorities began to tug on it? The chain of events that would captivate a nation was now in motion, beginning with a single, undeniable fact. 3 credible witnesses had encountered something beyond all conventional explanation. Dawn on January 21st brought no clarity, only a deepening mystery. The fire department of Varginha received a communication that was anything but routine. The instructions were precise and unusual. Proceed immediately to the identified vacant lot and secure an unidentified biological entity. Sergeant Marco Eli Cherez and Corporal Rubens, both seasoned professionals with years of emergency experience, were specifically dispatched for this task. The preparatory measures alone raised immediate questions. They were instructed to wear thick leather gloves and utilize equipment not standard for animal control operations. The atmosphere at the station was palpably tense, the usual morning chatter replaced by a grim, focused seriousness. Arriving at the designated location, the 2 men conducted a systematic search of the area. The lot was quiet, the only sounds being the distant hum of morning traffic and the squelching of mud beneath their heavy boots. Then they located it. The creature matched the girl's description with astonishing accuracy. It was largely immobile, its once vibrant red eyes now dull and listless. The firefighters, men trained to confront danger with calm efficiency, felt a distinct wave of professional unease, this being fit no category in their experience. Using a specialized net, they carefully captured the entity. It offered minimal resistance, as if its energy reserves were completely depleted. As they lifted it, both men noted its surprising lightness and a distinct, pungent odor reminiscent of ammonia or sulfur. They secured it in the enclosed rear compartment of their official vehicle, a white Ford pickup truck, and began the slow drive back to the central station. The journey passed in heavy silence, the usual radio traffic conspicuously absent. Both men were lost in private contemplation, grappling with the bizarre reality of their mission. They were transporting a living creature that defied all known biological classification. Upon arrival at the station, the being was taken inside and the heavy garage doors closed behind them. From that precise moment forward, the entity effectively vanished from all public documentation. No official report would ever detail its subsequent handling or disposition. The questions began to multiply exponentially. Why the extreme operational secrecy? What was the true nature of the being they had captured? And why were these trained first responders, who had faced countless medical and disaster emergencies, so visibly and profoundly affected by this specific incident? The mystery took a devastating and deeply personal turn just over a week after the initial events. Sergeant Marco Eli Charisi, the firefighter, who had physically handled the creature during the capture operation, was admitted to the local regional hospital. His medical condition was both grave and deeply puzzling to the attending physicians. He presented with a rapid onset, exceptionally high fever, severe respiratory distress, and unusual epidermal lesions that defied easy diagnosis. His immune system appeared to be in a state of catastrophic collapse. Despite aggressive and comprehensive medical intervention, his health deteriorated at a frightening and inexplicable pace. On February 15, 1996, Sergeant Marco Eli Charisi died. The official cause of death was listed as fulminant septic shock, a generalized systemic infection of unidentified origin. The news sent a shockwave through the local community and the burgeoning international community of investigators who were closely following the case. The temporal proximity was impossible to rationally ignore. A healthy, physically fit young man, a military firefighter in prime condition, had succumbed to a bizarre and aggressively virulent illness, just days after direct physical contact with an unknown biological entity. His grieving family was left with profound sorrow and a host of unanswerable questions. Had he been exposed to some form of unknown pathogen during that capture operation? Was his tragic death merely a horrific coincidence? Or was it a direct consequence of his actions in the line of duty? The official institutions maintained a noticeable distance from these questions. No comprehensive epidemiological study was ever launched to investigate potential links between his fatal illness and his professional activities. The fire department administration offered no public comment on the possible occupational hazards of the January 21st operation. The military's wall of silence remained firmly intact and unbreached. The death of Sergeant Charisi fundamentally transformed the narrative of the Varginha Incident. It was no longer just an intriguing story about a strange sighting. It was now a profound human tragedy. It introduced a frightening element of palpable biological danger and gave significant credence to the troubling theory that the captured creatures may have represented an unknown biological hazard. This single sorrowful event became the darkest and most compelling argument for those who believed the authorities were systematically hiding a dangerous and unsettling truth from the public. What exactly killed Marco Eli Charisi, and why was there no transparent, thorough investigation into the terrifying cause of his fatal illness? While the fire department secured its perplexing capture, a parallel narrative began unfolding elsewhere in the city, this one involving a far more powerful and habitually secretive institution, the Brazilian army. Multiple, independent, civilian witnesses began reporting unusual military activity in the Jardim André neighborhood. The timing was conspicuously synchronous, strongly suggesting a coordinated, multi-agency response. Residents observed distinctive olive-green military vehicles moving through areas where they had no routine presence. The official explanation, when one was eventually offered, was a brief and dismissive statement about routine training exercises. However, the details observed by numerous civilians painted a radically different picture. Soldiers were witnessed wearing full-body protective suits and respiratory masks, equipment completely inconsistent with standard military drills. These personnel were seen carefully loading a substantial metallic container into a specialized transport vehicle. The entire operation was conducted with a quiet, methodical efficiency that indicated prior planning and specific protocols. The involvement of the military instantly elevated the incident from a local curiosity to a matter with potential national security implications. It effectively created two distinct yet intertwined narratives: the public story of a strange creature captured by civil firefighters, and the shadowy, unacknowledged tale of a simultaneous military retrieval operation. This fundamental bifurcation sowed the seeds for decades of speculation, research, and profound public distrust. Why would an army battalion be deployed to capture what was supposedly a simple, if unusual, animal? The official wall of silence began to rise with remarkable speed. Fire department personnel were reportedly instructed not to discuss the incident with anyone. The military steadfastly denied any involvement beyond their alleged training mission. The creature or creatures, the central physical evidence of the entire affair, had disappeared into the impenetrable labyrinth of state institutions. The disconnect between what multiple citizens witnessed and what the authorities would officially acknowledge was now absolute and unbridgeable. What had truly occurred in Varginha that warranted such a rapid, extensive, and clandestine military response, one that would be so consistently and vehemently denied for decades thereafter? The story of Varginha proved impossible to contain within the city's borders. It exploded into the international spotlight during February of 1996, drawing journalists, documentary filmmakers, ufologists, and private investigators from across Brazil and around the globe. The Brazilian media uniformly dubbed it O Caso Varginha, and the world watched with intensifying fascination. In the glare of this relentless media attention, new witnesses found the courage to step forward from the shadows. Their collective accounts added complex layers of detail and significant credibility to the ever-expanding case. A group of 7 women came forward independently, each describing strikingly similar scenes of soldiers operating in the area near the municipal zoo, meticulously handling a wooden crate that allegedly emitted a foul, sulphurous odor and strange, persistent scratching sounds from within. Then emerged the most explosive and controversial testimony from a source who demanded absolute, ironclad anonymity, a man claiming to be a military medic. He alleged that he was secretly summoned to conduct a preliminary examination of one of the creatures, which was already deceased. His description was chillingly specific and clinically detailed. He spoke of a biological specimen with 3 distinct protuberances on its cranial area, no visible oral cavity or external ears, and skin tissue that neither bled when incised nor showed standard cellular structure under preliminary microscopic analysis. He particularly emphasized the overwhelming ammonia-like stench that permeated the examination room, a specific detail that provided startling corroboration to the earlier accounts from the firefighters. Simultaneously, independent investigators began piecing together other anomalous data points. Scattered reports of unusual radar returns from the region during the nights immediately preceding the incident, and persistent whispers of a heightened, unexplained alert status at a nearby Brazilian Air Force installation. The sheer volume and remarkable consistency of these independent accounts stood in stark, dramatic contrast to the continued blanket of official denials. The Brazilian Army, the Air Force, and municipal authorities all maintained a unified, impenetrable front of silence or outright dismissal. This profound and systematic disconnect was no longer merely puzzling. It appeared deeply and deliberately suspicious. It strongly suggested a coordinated, high-level institutional strategy to suppress information of significant magnitude. What possible justification could exist for this pervasive culture of secrecy and the apparent institutional disregard for the public's fundamental right to knowledge, particularly when potential public health risks were implicitly involved? More than 2.5 decades have now passed since that fateful rainy January in 1996. The Varginha incident has not faded into harmless obscurity or been dismissed as collective folklore. It has instead solidified its position as one of the most compelling, complex, and persistently investigated mystery cases in the modern world. The central civilian witnesses, the three women and the surviving firefighter, Corporal Rubens, have never wavered in their core accounts, their collective credibility enduring through years of intense public scrutiny, media sensationalism, and official skepticism. The tragic and untimely death of Sergeant Marco Eli Cherise remains an open wound within the narrative and a permanent, sobering component of the story, a heartbreaking footnote that underscores the potentially grave stakes involved. The city itself has with time woven the extraordinary event into its very identity, a testament to the incident's enduring psychological and cultural power. Contemporary investigators, now armed with advanced digital technologies and sophisticated forensic analysis techniques, continue to re-examine the existing evidence and pursue new leads. Persistent applications through freedom of information legislation have eventually pried loose a limited number of heavily redacted official documents that quietly confirm the occurrence of unusual military activity during that period. Yet the complete, unvarnished truth remains securely locked within classified archives. The case as it exists today is a rich, complex tapestry of hard evidence and enduring unanswered questions. It is constructed not upon fantasy or speculation, but upon a solid foundation of credible, consistent eyewitness testimony from multiple independent sources, documented professional actions by respected public servants, unexplained environmental and physical evidence, and an official institutional response characterized overwhelmingly by obfuscation, omission, and silence. It continuously challenges us to honestly reconsider the accepted limits of our scientific understanding and to critically examine the true transparency of our governing institutions. The most enduring legacy of Varginha is not a definitive answer or a closed case file, but a persistent, unresolved question mark hanging over official history. It serves as a permanent reminder that some mysteries possess the inherent strength to refuse being buried, and that the sincere, often difficult pursuit of truth frequently continues long after the official files have been prematurely closed and forgotten by the authorities. What final key piece of evidence or act of courage will it ultimately require for the full, complete story to finally be revealed to the world?